German Chancellor Angela Merkel is currently in Washington, D.C. And tonight, she'll receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom from President Obama as the White House hosts a state dinner. But maybe what Obama should really be doing is asking Merkel how it is that Germany's economy, the fourth largest in the world, is recovering so well from the recession. 2010 was an all-star year for Germany. Their economy grew nearly 6 times faster than the U.S. in the second quarter. For 2011, that projected growth is looking to be a little smaller than the U.S., 2.5% versus a U.S. 2.8%. But a Eurozone and a debt crisis is partially responsible for that. But their unemployment rate is where we really have to look at it. They're at 7% compared to the U.S. 9.1%. That's all while having one of the highest tax rates in the world, high wages, high social welfare benefits, all those things that our right wing likes to scorn as socialism or the death of capitalism. But you can't call Germany's economy a closed one. They're the second largest exporter in the world, trailing only China, which has 16 times its population. So what can we learn from Germany? Here to discuss this with me is Derek Thompson, Associate Editor at The Atlantic. Derek, thanks so much for being here tonight.
Good to be back.
Let's start with unemployment. What exactly is it that Germany did to keep their employers from hiring or actually to encourage more hiring or to keep them from firing people at the get-go?
Right. There's two advantages that Germany has when it comes to unemployment. First, they literally paid employers not to fire workers. It's something called work sharing. There's actually some U.S. economists that have suggested that we do the same here. Essentially, you have your workers work fewer hours, and then you pay the employers back for those hours missed. It's work sharing, and it's worked for Germany. The second thing that happened is, like you mentioned, Germany had a really stellar 2010 year. And that's mostly because the developing world just started rocketing at the end of 2009. China, India, Brazil had wonderful, wonderful years. And Germany sells the industrial products that help them build up their economies, draw up ore out of the earth, and then build up cities and machines. So those are really the two reasons I'd say why Germany is in the position where it is right now.
Well, I want to get more to the exports and to the trade, but in terms of the unemployment and asking or basically giving employers an incentive to keep people around because the government will pay the rest of the share, do you think that's something that we'd ever actually see happen here in America? You said that some economists have toyed with the idea, but I feel like the idea of government interfering with business that way would just would never be accepted.
I think it would be called socialist. I think absolutely. I mean, the government literally would be paying employers to keep workers. That's a lot of interference, or at least intervention. And I think a lot of people would scoff at it. But conservative economists and liberal economists have both said if we're going to get creative about ways to keep down unemployment, this is a good way to do so.
Well, I think you have a point there when it comes to calling things socialist. This is the line that we constantly hear from the right wing, and it's something that we even heard from Mitt Romney the other week when he was finally announcing his presidential bid. And of course, that's supposed to be his strong point as the businessman when it comes to criticizing Obama. And this is what he had to say. Let's take a listen.
Did you know that government, federal, state, and local, under President Obama, has grown to consume almost 40% of our economy? We're only inches away from ceasing to be a free economy.
Are we really only inches away from ceasing to be a free economy?
No, absolutely
not. That was a ludicrous statement.
Mitt Romney's running for president. When you're running for president, he's a businessman, and the business of running for president is making huge claims that draw a stark contrast with the opposition as possible. But the fact is, Germany has some of the highest tax rates in the world, or at least in the European Union.
In the European Union,
right.
It's about 50% actually their tax rate.
It's an enormous effective tax rate, yeah, on the richest Germans. And as we can see, they're growing this year at projected 2.7%, last year around 3%. It's a vibrant economy. It is the engine of the European economy. It's literally responsible for keeping the entire European Union together. Tax rates and growth can coexist. They have coexisted in the U.S. They do coexist in Germany. Mitt Romney can say whatever he wants, but that's just how it is.
And actually, you're right. Germany not only has one of the highest tax rates in the world, but if it comes to their social spending, about 30% of their national income goes to that versus only 18% here in the U.S. But for some reason, we just can't seem to accept that notion. I do want to then go to exports as well, because I think that one of the critiques we constantly hear in America, at least, is that we want our cheap goods. We don't want to buy expensive stuff, so we can't manufacture any longer because everything's made cheaper in China or in India or in some other developing economy. But Germany doesn't really make cheap goods. So how is it that they're still the #2 exporter in the world?
Well, I want to talk about geography here, because let's say you're making some sort of good, whether it's an airplane or some metal gizmo in Kansas. Are you going to try to sell it, try to ship it across the world to sell it to, say, Indonesia? Or are you just going to sell it within the largest consumer economy in the world, which is the United States? You're probably just going to try to sell it here. Germany doesn't have that option. Germans are notoriously high savers, and they're surrounded by countries that spend a little bit more of their money per capita than Germans. So they're more inclined to sell their product to the Netherlands, to France, to Spain, and that's an export. So in a way, geography helps Germany. Where it hurts Germany is that they're a part of the European Union, and the European Union is being dragged down by these peripheral states. So geography is not entirely Germany's friend. But I think when a lot of people are saying, oh, well, it's so easy to export, let's just be like Germany, we're not the size of Texas, we're the size of China. And it's difficult for a country or for a company deep inside the country to think, oh, well, obviously, I'll just try to find a market in Mexico for my products. You're likely just going to look at home.
I'm happy that you brought up, actually, the fact that Germans are very big savers, something that we haven't really seen in American culture in a while. Quite honestly, we've just become the credit culture, right? We just charge and charge and charge, and we assume that we'll pay it off later at some point. And so there have been a lot of critiques when it comes to the stimulus plan coming from the Obama administration, pointing to Germany saying, look, their stimulus was so much smaller and they were doing better than we are. But is it because they're better savers?
Well, I mean, these are totally different economies, right? It's difficult to compare like stimulus to stimulus and say that ours worked better, ours worked worse. Germany has a very different way that they tax, they spend, a sort of a social contract. In the U.S., if you had effective tax rates near 50%, you would, or if you asked for something like that, you would be called socialist. We had something a little bit similar in, say, the 60s or late 50s, but the economy's changed. And really, on the one hand, we're a 50-50 nation, and we're going to have to find some way to make deals with the Mitt Romneys of the world, but at the same time, it's just inevitable that we move back to being more of a high-tax country simply to be able to pay for the benefits that we've promised. We're also going to have to make cuts on the domestic side, and Germany's been really smart about keeping their finances in hold, but at the same time, we're going to have to sort of claw that tax rate back up.
What I meant by that, basically, is the fact that, let's say that we did have a stimulus, and let's say that there were certain tax breaks or, money that the government gave out to businesses, to homeowners here in the U.S. We're too busy paying off our debts to actually inject that money back into the economy, to go out and spend once again, or companies claim that they can't hire because they have to pay off debts, although I think that there's just no incentive for them to hire people when they don't have to. But I think that you really hit it on the nose, too, in the fact that Germany has more of a social contract. They don't look at their economy in a partisan way, and we do. So are we ever going to be able to get out of a rut? Some people are saying that this might be the next Great Depression if we continue to have a partisan approach to the economy.
Right. I mean, Germany has its own internal politics. I'm not an expert on them, but I assume that they're not living in some sort of utopia. At the same time, I think the point you made about saving is absolutely right. You have to look at how we got into the recession, and we got into the recession with debt because families were encouraged not to save by certain government incentives and also through cultural incentives. Germany, with its high savings rate, did not enter this recession with the same kind of debt, and that put them in a better position going forward. It made smaller stimulus more effective because people didn't have to pay down their debt. They could spend it on new products. And so that's just an advantage that they had. And I do think that going forward, we're going to want to look at a probably slightly higher tax and higher savings country so that we don't have this exact same problem all over again.
Good luck selling that one here. Derek, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks.